This is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a most marvelous day. Thank you for your support. Please hit the notification bell so you'll know when new videos are being uploaded. Thank you for your thumbs up, for your comments, and thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. Well, today I'm continuing the discussion of self-hatred in the African American community, and I'm bringing in some heavy hitters, and that's our ancestors. So the title of the video is What the Ancestors of African Americans Said About Self-Hatred. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a psychologist to see that self-hatred is running rampant in the African American community. You can hear it in the music, in the language, in the way we dress, even in the way we treat each other. It's obvious, and it's becoming more and more chronic. When we have to try to do something to offset this, our ancestors saw it, and they saw that it was going to get more serious, and so they left information behind to try to help us navigate through this. So I'm going to listen to the ancestors and hear what they had to say about self-hatred, and hopefully we can come up with some ways to offset this so that we can move ourselves together in a healthy way. I will begin with the master, Dr. John Henry Clark, who was a professor, a historian, and pioneer of Pan-Africana studies and professional institutions in academia starting in the late 1960s. He became an ancestor in 1998. I'm beginning with Dr. Clark because he established the place and the ancestral homeland for people of African descent. He said, "Africa is our center of gravity, our cultural and spiritual mother and father, our beating heart, no matter where we live on the face of the earth." If Africa is our center, then an African American is a stranger in a foreign land. It's like the song we used to sing in church. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long, long way from home. Dr. Clark further states, there was a time when all dark-skinned people were called Ethiopians, for the Greeks referred to Africa as the land of the burnt-faced people. I use those two quotes to illustrate that we are a people outside of our natural environment, and we all know how we got here, but that was the beginning of our self-hatred. The cruelest thing slavery and colonialism did to the Africans was to destroy their memory of who they were before foreign contact. In the land of our captivity, it was necessary for our captors to control us. Dr. Clark says, to control a people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when your conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls and no chains to hold you. Quote number 5, Dr. Clark says, I want to make it clear that the black race did not come to the United States culturally empty-handed. The role and importance of ethnic history is in how well it teaches a people to use their own talents, take pride in their own history, and love their own memories. Now here is the base of the problem. We came to the United States with culture, with history, and with memories. But the goal, and one of the primary goals of the system that we were in, was to make us forget, so that people will routinely tell us we have no culture, even as they mimic and imitate everything that they say us do. Even if it's just a handshake or just a call word to each other, other people will be doing it, all the while saying we have no culture. Even these Africans are coming here saying we don't have any culture. Even as they invade everything we do, we have to tell them, no, this is not for you. You don't speak for us. So the goal has been to make us forget. But as has been confirmed, DNA has memory, and somewhere deep down in our soul, we know we have culture, history, and memory. The next ancestor is Dr. Francis KRS Wilson. Dr. Wilson was a celebrated psychiatrist. Her essay, Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism, offered her interpretation of the origin of white supremacy culture. She's best known as author of the ISIS Papers, published in 1991, and she became an ancestor in January of 2016. Dr. Wilson speaks about the successful indoctrination of self-hatred in African Americans and why our self-hatred is connected to the survival of white people. She says it's about a total system structure that has, as its goal objective, white genetic survival. The people who classify themselves as white represent 1/10 of the people on the planet and are now becoming a minority in the United States. So this is very disturbing to them. Dr. Wilson explains how this self-hatred indoctrination aids in the survival of white supremacy. She says, we're the only people on this entire planet who have been taught to sing and praise our demeaning. I'm a B, I'm an H, I'm a gangster, I'm a thug, I'm a dog. If you can train people to demean and degrade themselves, you can oppress them forever. You can even program them to kill themselves, and they won't even understand what happened. We do not realize that the massive deaths of black males constitute the genocide of black people, as it takes black males to make black babies and ensure future black generations. Most important, black males must help one another to understand that they are being led by the dynamic of white supremacy to inflict extreme damage upon themselves, one another, and ultimately the black race. Again, Dr. Wilson speaks to the negative influences in the culture as a reason why we're not making the progress we should be making. She says, we wonder why we're not making progress. I can't call myself a B, H, gangster, and thug every day and then get up and do something constructive. That's impossible. Dr. Wilson believed that lack of self-love, which is self-hatred, was the core of the problems in the African American community. And many agree with her. She said, I won't rest until black children are taught to love themselves. That is the problem. But the cure is for us to learn how to love ourselves and each other. And the sooner the better, because it's for our own survival. The next ancestor is Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was an educator, author, orator, and advisor to several presidents, but he's best known as the founder of Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University. We know that Booker T. Washington believed in education. He has written that one of the worst crimes of slavery was not allowing the enslaved people to learn how to read and write. Booker T. Washington was born into slavery, and it ended when he was about 10 years old. And he was also affronted by the fact that the enslaved people were compelled, grown men and women, to behave like children. He thought that the key to liberation for the former enslaved people was for them to learn about the world and, more importantly, to learn about themselves. I will repeat myself for emphasis. Booker T. Washington was born into slavery. He said the prime condition of slavery was to keep closed every avenue to knowledge. The Negro had no estate, no family life. His sole inheritance was his body. So work was the only thing that they were allowed to do. Now, when Booker T. Washington was allowed to go to school, this is his assessment of the American educational and indoctrination system. He writes, no American ever thinks that any other race is wholly civilized until he wears the white man's clothes, eats the white man's food, speaks the white man's language, and professes the white man's religion. Now this is conservative, what everybody calls Uncle Tom, Booker T. Washington, writing about the influence of white supremacy. And to double down on the notion of studying other people's culture, he said, you go to school, you study about the Germans and the French, but not about your own race. I hope the time will come when you study black history too. And this is what he said in a lecture to African American students. Now this one is almost amusing. Booker T. Washington said, we do not want the men of another color for our brothers-in-law, but we do want them for our brothers. And it may take a while for this one to sink in, but it is related to self-hatred. So it's there. This last quote from Booker T. Washington is especially important. He writes, years ago I resolved that because I had no ancestors myself, I would leave a record of which my children would be proud and which might encourage them to still higher effort. And we're glad he left this record because he is an ancestor, and his knowledge, his effort, his expertise, his energy, all that he did from the time he started at Tuskegee in 1881 till he died in 1915 has helped all of us. The next ancestor is Malcolm X. He was a Muslim minister, a civil rights activist, and a spokesman for the Nation of Islam until he left the nation. He was a lifelong advocate for black empowerment and advocated for the unification of African-descended people. He was assassinated in February of 1965 when he became an ancestor. Malcolm X left behind so much powerful information that's really needed today that I hardly know where to start, so I'll just start. He says, America's greatest crime against the black man was not slavery or lynching, but that he was taught to wear a mask of self-hate and self-doubt. So this was the beginning of the self-hatred in black people. In one of his well-known speeches, Malcolm X asks a group of black people, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God made you? Realizing that the root of our self-hatred comes from Africa, hating being of African descent, he said, you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. He further states, we cannot think of being acceptable to others until we have first proven acceptable to ourselves. You can't love somebody else until you love yourself. In this statement, Malcolm X speaks to the self-hatred of black people. He said, one thing I noticed about black people is that we love and accept other races and cultures before we love and accept our own. This is one of my favorite quotes of Malcolm X's because it speaks to the notion that many African Americans have that the problems in the black community have something to do with white men, that white men need to change something about themselves. Malcolm X said, instead of changing the mind of the white man, we change the mind of the black man and make him accept himself. And as soon as he accepts himself, he'll solve his own problems. So he saw the problems in the black community as black men's self-hatred. Black men not wanting to be black men. And affirming his own status as a black man, he said, I am black first. My sympathies are black. My allegiance is black. My objectives are black. And then, as a footnote for the ages, he said, there can be no black-white unity until there is first some black unity. We cannot think of uniting with others until after we have first united among ourselves. The next ancestor is Elijah Muhammad. He was a religious leader, an author, and a self-proclaimed messenger of God. He was the founder of the Nation of Islam and a noted mentor and teacher of Malcolm X. He became an ancestor in February of 1975. Even though the messenger, Minister Muhammad, is considered controversial, he did found an important religious organization, and he did deal with African American men almost exclusively. So he recognized and understood the self-hatred of black people. I will admit that some of the things that Minister Muhammad said were pretty harsh. He said, the Negro wants to be everything but himself. He wants to integrate with the white man, but he cannot integrate with himself or with his own kind. The Negro wants to lose his identity because he does not know his own identity. Again, he said, you, the black man, are the only members of the human race that deliberately walk past the place of business of one of your own kind, a black man, and spend your dollars with your natural enemy. And this speaks to black people preferring anybody but themselves and people who look like them. And this was pretty true. The minister, however, did preach unity as a means of black people liberating themselves from oppression. He said, not one of us will have to raise a sword, not one gun would we need to fire. The great cannon that will be fired is our unity. His final message on self-hatred was for black people to accept your own and be yourself. And I will add that that is the key to self-respect and self-love. The last ancestor is a young ancestor, Tupac Shakur. He was a charismatic rapper, songwriter, and actor. He was also an activist in many ways because he spoke out about the social issues in the inner cities. He became an ancestor in September of 1996. It is hard to talk about a young man who was gunned down so young because we saw his rise and we saw his fall. But he did leave behind some words that I think we could benefit from because he really is the embodiment of what black self-hatred looks like. Black on black crime, a young man shot down before his crime. He hadn't even peaked yet, and he's killed, and nobody really knows why, and I'm not really sure anybody knows who did it. So his death is really black self-hatred personified in the form of black on black crime. So here we have it. A young man who is handsome, beautiful really, gifted, had everything to live for, and this is what he thinks of himself. I hate the man in the mirror because his reflection makes the pain turn realer. Self-hatred. He seems to be coming into self-awareness when he says, you gotta make a change. It's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we eat. Let's change the way we live. Let's change the way we treat each other. You see, the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to do what we gotta do to survive. So unfortunately, he did not live long enough to make that change. But at least he saw it. He was coming into it. Here he says, no one knows my struggle. They only see the trouble, not knowing how hard it is to carry on when no one loves you. Now here's a young man who doesn't feel loved by anyone and not knowing how to love himself. How tragic. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, the darker the flesh, the deeper the roots. This refers to skin tone. I remember growing up when somebody would call you black. Someone would tell you, usually a grown person, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Now that was to make you feel better that you might be black, but you were sweet. But this refers to denigrating somebody because of their skin tone. And I'm pretty sure that this was a part of his self-hatred journey, having darker skin. So this is something that plagues African Americans and it is at the root of our self-hatred, dark skin. So Tupac Shakur had the presence of mind to come up with his own black code, and this is something, by reading it, you can tell. This is what he saw as the beginning of us learning to appreciate each other and have some kind of self-love for ourselves and each other. So his black code reads, we do not steal from one another, we do not kill one another, we do not sell or offer drugs to one another, we do combine our dollars and buy collectively as a group. We protect our own women and children first. We educate our own at every chance. We do not fight one another. Brothers protect and build up one another. Sisters protect and build up one another. Brothers protect and build up sisters. Sisters protect and build up brothers. We look for every opportunity to start our own business, servicing the need of our people first. Wow. Just wow. Self-hatred has been with us for a very long time. It has been the source of murdering each other, of giving away wealth to other races of people. It has been a problem. At some point, we have to deal with it if we want to survive as a people. And I think the ancestors left this information behind to help guide us and navigate through this self-hatred that we continue to feel and that continues to plague us. We have to learn to be thankful and be grateful, and to be grateful for who God made us, and because we cannot realize our gifts and live our best lives if we are bogged down with self-hatred for ourselves and for each other. I hope we will study what the ancestors have said and try to govern ourselves accordingly and start trying to deal with this self-hatred in our communities that's really destroying our young people and our communities, and is causing all of this friction between black men and black women. We have to deal with it at some point, because self-hatred is a mental illness. Thank you so much for listening to the video. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll know when new videos are being uploaded. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share the videos, and as always, have a great day.